5:30 in the morning on May 5th, 1945, Private First Class Desmond Thomas Doss crouched at the edge of Hacksaw Ridge. He watched Japanese artillery tear through what remained of Company B. He was 26 years old and had earned 2 Bronze Stars. He carried no weapons. The escarpment below him was 400 feet of sheer cliff face. Above him, 75 wounded Americans were scattered across enemy-held ground. His commanding officer had just ordered a full retreat. Standard military doctrine said to climb down the cargo nets to safety. Doss stayed instead. He had maybe 30 minutes before the Japanese counterattack overwhelmed the position entirely. Everything he had been taught said this was suicide. The medic's job was to treat the wounded and get them to battalion aid. It was not to stay alone on a plateau crawling with enemy soldiers. It was not to lower men one by one down a cliff face while machine gun fire raked the position. But Doss looked at the wounded men screaming for help. He had promised God he would save lives. He knelt in the dirt and prayed. His prayer was for help to get just one more man. Then he crawled toward the first wounded man. The Japanese were 200 yards away and closing fast. 4 weeks earlier, nobody in the 77th Infantry Division believed Desmond Doss would survive Okinawa. Most did not think he would even survive basic training. The numbers told a brutal story. The Battle of Okinawa had started on April 1st, 1945, Easter Sunday. 5 weeks into the battle, American casualties exceeded 39,000. The Japanese had turned the island into a fortress. Every hill, every cave, and every ridge was defended to the death. Hacksaw Ridge sat in the middle of this nightmare. It was the Maida Escarpment, a 400-foot plateau of coral and rock. The Japanese had spent months fortifying it. Tunnels honeycombed the interior. Machine gun ports covered every approach. Artillery was zeroed on the summit. The 96th Infantry Division tried first. They climbed the escarpment on April 26th. The Japanese drove them back. There were 500 casualties in 4 days. The 96th tried again with the same result. By May 1st, the division was shattered. The 77th Infantry moved in to relieve them. Nobody was optimistic. The deadly math was clear. To reach the plateau, soldiers had to climb 400 feet up cargo nets. They were fully loaded with rifles, ammunition, water, and grenades. Japanese defenders fired down from prepared positions. A climbing man could not shoot back. He could not take cover. He could not do anything except climb and pray. The nets swayed. Men's hands cramped. Some lost their grip and fell. The Japanese did not waste bullets on men falling to their deaths. This pattern killed consistently. Company A of the 1st Battalion, 307th Infantry tried on May 1st. They spliced 4 50-foot ladders together at the eastern end. Every man who reached the top died. They were not wounded, but dead. The Japanese had machine guns positioned to cover that exact spot. There were no survivors. The math was simple. The math was brutal. Company B tried a different approach. They used cargo nets farther west. 2 platoons made it to the edge of the escarpment, barely. Then the Japanese opened fire from positions nobody had spotted. Artillery, mortars, and machine guns all fired at once. The coral shattered into shrapnel. Men died before they understood what hit them. The Battle of Okinawa had already killed 14,000 American servicemen. The Japanese called it Tetsu no Ami, the rain of steel. So much iron flew through the air that survival was a mathematical impossibility. Japanese defenders had orders to hold every position until death. There was no surrender and no retreat. Kill ratios meant nothing when the enemy considered death itself a victory. Desmond Doss refused to carry a weapon into this hell. If you want to see how Doss survived what happened next, understand this right now. Every soldier who mocked him in training, every officer who tried to discharge him, and every man who threw boots at him while he prayed were all about to owe him their lives. Fort Jackson, South Carolina, spring 1942. Desmond reported for basic training with the 77th Infantry Division. He was 22 years old and weighed 140 pounds. He was a Seventh-day Adventist and had conscientious objector status. He refused to touch a rifle and refused to train on Saturdays. The other recruits thought he was insane. Sergeant Howell ran the training. He was a former Detroit police officer who was hard, fair, and had zero tolerance for weakness. When Doss refused to participate in rifle practice, Howell assigned extra duties. This included latrine detail and kitchen detail. Doss did every miserable job available without complaint. That made it worse. The other men hated him more. Captain Jack Glover commanded Company B. He was a Kentucky native and a career officer. Glover looked at Doss and saw a liability. A soldier who refused to carry a weapon was a soldier who would get other men killed. Glover tried to discharge Doss under Section 8 for psychiatric unfitness. The Army psychiatrist examined Doss and found him completely sane. Religious conviction did not constitute mental illness. Glover's discharge request was denied. The harassment escalated. Shoes were thrown at Doss during evening prayers. He was accidentally tripped during drills. One night, several soldiers beat him in the barracks. Doss refused to identify his attackers. This confused everyone. The kid would not fight back. He would not carry a weapon. Yet he would not report the men who beat him either. It was some twisted code of honor that made no sense to them. Before shipping out, Doss married Dorothy Schutte on August 17, 1942. They had met at church in Lynchburg. She was a nurse. He was a medic trainee. Dorothy gave him a Bible. She inscribed it with the words, "If we do not meet another time on this earth, we have the assurance of a happy meeting place in heaven." Doss carried that Bible through every battle. It never left his side. The 77th Division deployed to the Pacific Theater in 1944. Their first stop was Guam in July. The island had been in Japanese hands since 1941. Retaking it meant brutal jungle fighting and close combat. Here the men of Company B learned something about their unarmed medic. When bullets started flying, Doss ran toward the wounded, not away. Guam's jungle became a slaughterhouse. Japanese defenders fought from prepared positions. There were machine gun nests, mortar pits, and sniper positions in trees. The 77th advanced yard by yard. Men fell constantly. Doss was everywhere. He ran through fire to reach wounded men. He dragged them to cover. He treated sucking chest wounds. He applied tourniquets to shattered limbs. He never stopped and never hid. During one firefight, a soldier took 3 rounds in the chest. He was 200 yards from friendly lines. The Japanese had the area bracketed with machine gun fire. Nobody could reach him. He was screaming. Doss crawled through grass 2 feet high. Bullets clipped the vegetation around him. He reached the wounded man, bandaged him, and dragged him back. The whole company watched. For his actions on Guam, Doss received the Bronze Star for valor. The skepticism began cracking. Maybe the conscientious objector was not worthless after all. Leyte, Philippines. November 1944. The 77th fought in mountains and rice paddies. Monsoon rains turned everything to mud. Japanese defenders used the terrain expertly. Ambushes, night raids, and constant pressure marked the fighting. Doss earned a second Bronze Star here for going after wounded men under fire again and again. Captain Glover noticed something. Every time someone got hit, Doss appeared. It did not matter how heavy the fire. It did not matter how bad the position. Doss always showed up. The men stopped throwing boots during his prayers. They started asking him to pray for them instead. By the time the 77th reached Okinawa in April 1945, Desmond Doss had earned grudging respect. He had proven his courage. However, nobody believed courage alone could save him on Hacksaw Ridge. The escarpment ate entire companies whole. April 29, 1945, the 307th Infantry Regiment moved into position at the base of the Maida Escarpment. The mission was to climb the ridge and secure the plateau. Intelligence estimated 2,000 Japanese defenders were dug into tunnels and hidden in caves. They had artillery support from positions miles away. Company B began the ascent on May 2nd. They used cargo nets, hand over hand, 400 feet straight up. The coral face provided no cover. Japanese observers watched from concealed positions. They let the Americans climb. They waited until 100 men reached the top. Then they opened fire. Everything fired at once. Type 92 heavy machine guns fired 7.7 millimeter rounds at 450 rounds per minute. Type 89 grenade launchers fired 50 millimeter rounds that burst in deadly airbursts. Type 41 75 millimeter mountain guns fired direct fire onto the plateau. The Americans had climbed into a kill zone carefully prepared over months. Men died instantly. Others fell wounded and could not be moved. The plateau offered minimal cover. There were a few shell holes and some rocky outcrops. The Japanese had all of it mapped. If one shot came from cover, mortar rounds arrived 20 seconds later. The coral shattered into jagged shrapnel, causing secondary wounds everywhere. Doss moved through this hell-treating wounded men. A soldier took shrapnel to the face. Blood was everywhere. He could not see. Doss washed his face with canteen water and bandaged the wounds. The man's eyes opened. He said, "Thanks, Doc." Doss moved to the next casualty and the next and the next. For 3 days, Company B held the edge of Hacksaw Ridge. Barely. The Japanese counterattacked at night. Banzai charges involved screaming and bayonets. There was hand-to-hand combat in darkness. Americans and Japanese killed each other in shell holes. Dawn revealed the carnage. Bodies piled in no man's land between positions. Doss treated American and Japanese wounded without distinction. A wounded enemy soldier was still a wounded man. Some of the Americans questioned this. Doss ignored them. His job was saving lives. All lives. May 4th, 1945, the Japanese launched a major counteroffensive. This was not just at Hacksaw Ridge, but across the entire Shuri line. Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima committed his reserves. Thousands of Japanese infantry supported by artillery attacked. The goal was to drive the Americans off the escarpment. They aimed to retake lost ground and kill as many Americans as possible. The attack hit Company B at 400 in the morning. An artillery barrage came first. Hundreds of rounds landed on the small plateau. Then infantry attacked wave after wave. They were screaming, shooting, and throwing grenades. The Americans fought desperately. They used M1 Garands against Arisaka rifles. Browning automatic rifles swept the approaches, but the Japanese kept coming. At 800 in the morning, Captain Glover made the call. The position was being overrun. Casualties were too heavy, and ammunition was running low. He ordered, "Fall back! Everybody down the nets!" The order passed man to man. Wounded soldiers were helped to the cargo nets. The able-bodied provided covering fire. One by one, Company B descended. The cliff. By 900 in the morning, the plateau was empty of Americans. Only 75 wounded men who could not move on their own remained. And one unarmed medic refused to leave them. At 9:30 in the morning, Desmond Doss was alone on Hacksaw Ridge. Japanese soldiers were 200 yards away. They moved through the position. They finished off wounded Americans with bayonets and looted bodies. Doss could hear them talking and laughing. He had minutes, maybe. He crawled to the nearest wounded man, Private James Doris from Texas. Doris was 19 years old. He had shrapnel in both legs and could not walk. Doss checked his wounds. They were serious, but not immediately fatal. Doss told him, "I am getting you out of here." Doris looked at him like he was insane. He told Doss, "Doc, the whole company is gone. We are dead." Doss replied, "Not yet." Doss dragged Doris toward the western edge of the escarpment. It was 40 yards. He was pulling a 180-pound man across broken coral. Japanese voices grew closer. Doss reached the edge and looked down. It was 400 feet of cliff. There were no cargo nets on this side, just rock face. He had prepared for this. Weeks earlier, Doss had studied the escarpment. He noticed a spot where the overhang was not as severe. He noticed a stunted tree growing from the rock. He had gotten rope, 100 feet of hemp line. He tied a bowline knot and tested it. It was a knot he had learned as a kid, a double figure 8. It was secure and reliable. Doss looped the rope around the tree trunk. He wrapped the other end around Doris. Doss told Doris this would be painful. He lowered Doris over the edge, hand over hand. The rope burned through his palms. Doris disappeared over the cliff. After 30 seconds, then 60 seconds, and then 90 seconds. The rope went slack. Doris reached the bottom. Medics at the base pulled him to safety. Doss pulled up the rope and coiled it. He prayed for strength to get one more man. He crawled back onto the plateau. The Japanese were now 150 yards away. They moved systematically, checking bodies and shooting anything that still moved. Doss stayed low. He soon reached another wounded man, Corporal Ralph Baker from Ohio. A machine gun burst had wounded him through the shoulder. Baker was conscious but in shock. Corporal Baker told Doss that he should not be there. Doss replied that neither should Baker. Doss quickly bandaged the soldier's shoulder. He then dragged Baker to the cliff, looped the rope, and began lowering him. The descent took 90 seconds. Doss then pulled up the rope, praying again for strength to get one more. Next, Doss found Private Eugene Nolan from New York. Nolan had suffered a grenade blast, and shrapnel peppered his back. Doss picked out the largest pieces and bandaged what he could. He then dragged Nolan, lowered him down, and pulled up the rope. His prayer continued, asking for strength to get one more. The Japanese were now 100 yards away. Doss could see them clearly. A squad of infantry moved through shell holes with bayonets fixed, looking for survivors. Doss froze, staying absolutely still. The patrol passed 30 yards from his position. They did not see him. Whether it was God's hand or blind luck, it did not matter. Doss then reached Private First Class Kenneth Harris from Alabama. Both of Harris's legs were shattered, and he was screaming in pain. Doss stuffed gauze into his mouth. He instructed Harris to bite down, warning that screaming would endanger them both. Doss lowered Harris down and pulled up the rope, once again praying for strength to get one more. At the base of the escarpment, medics could not believe what they were seeing. Wounded men appeared over the cliff edge, one after another, lowered on a single rope. Someone was still up there, saving them. The company had orders not to retake the ridge until the next day. However, the medics could hear Doss working. They heard the rope scraping against the rock. He was bringing down one more man, then another, and another. By noon, Doss had lowered 20 men. His hands were raw and bleeding from rope burns. His shoulders were cramping. The Japanese now controlled most of the plateau. He knew he had to move faster. He needed to find the wounded before the enemy did. Doss found Sergeant Thomas Williams from Georgia. Williams was unconscious with a head wound. Doss could not tell how severe the injury was, but it did not matter. He lowered Williams and pulled up the rope, continuing his prayer for one more. Next was Private Arthur Johnson from California. Johnson was gut shot and dying. He knew it. Doss bandaged him anyway and lowered him down. Johnson died at the battalion aid station 1 hour later. However, he died with medics treating him, not alone on a plateau with a bayonet through his chest. At 1400 hours, the Japanese launched another attack. They pushed across the plateau, eliminating American positions and consolidating control. Doss pressed himself into a shell hole. Japanese soldiers ran past, so close he could smell them, sweat, gun oil, and blood. They either did not see him, or they did not care. One unarmed medic was not a threat. When they passed, Doss moved again. He found Private Robert Mason from Pennsylvania, who had suffered burns. A white phosphorus grenade had burst nearby. Doss cut away the charred uniform, treated the burns, and then lowered Mason. He repeated his prayer, asking for strength to get one more. His prayer became automatic and mechanical. He was not asking for miracles. Instead, he asked for strength to keep moving, to find one more man, and to lower him down. Then he would do it again, just one more time. He believed God would provide the strength for each additional rescue. At 1600 hours, after 6 hours of crawling through the battlefield, Doss found Captain Glover. Glover was his commanding officer, the man who had tried to get him discharged. The captain was shot through the leg, with his femoral artery nicked and bleeding badly. Doss quickly applied a tourniquet. Glover was conscious and stared at him. Captain Glover asked Doss why he had not left. Doss responded that he had to get one more. Glover actually laughed, hysterical and in shock. He called Doss a stubborn man. Doss lowered him down the cliff, saving the man who had called him worthless. The irony was not lost on either of them. At 1800 hours, sunset was approaching. Doss had lowered 50 men, maybe more. He had lost count. His hands were shredded, with blood mixing with rope fiber. Every pull sent fire through his shoulders. He was dehydrated, having had his last water 6 hours ago. His vision blurred, but he could still hear more wounded men calling. Doss found Private John Hayes from Michigan, who had a spine injury and was paralyzed from the waist down. Doss had to move him very carefully. Any wrong movement could make his condition worse. Doss fashioned a makeshift stretcher from 2 rifles and a poncho, using someone's abandoned gear. He lowered Hayes down at an angle, which took 4 minutes, twice as long as usual. His prayer for strength to get one more continued. At 1900 hours, it was nearly dark. The Japanese had secured the plateau. They established defensive positions with machine guns covering the cargo net approaches. They had won and retaken Hacksaw Ridge. The Americans would have to assault it again tomorrow, leading to more casualties and more death. However, 75 men who should have died on that ridge were now alive at the battalion aid station. This was because one unarmed medic refused to leave. Doss found the last wounded man at 1930 hours. He was Private Charles Brown from Virginia. Brown was unconscious with multiple wounds and barely alive. Doss checked his pulse, which was weak and thready. Brown probably would not survive the trip down and likely would not survive the night. Doss lowered him anyway, sending him down to medics who might save him. He thanked the Lord for letting him get one more. Doss coiled the rope one last time. He looked across the plateau. Bodies were everywhere, American and Japanese mixed together. The coral was stained dark. This place would haunt him forever. However, 75 men were alive. 75 families would get their sons back. 75 soldiers would see victory, go home, and live full lives. He wrapped the rope around his waist and climbed over the edge. Doss lowered himself down hand over hand from a height of 400 feet. His hands could not grip any more. He used his legs, wrapping the rope, which caused friction burns through his uniform. At 200 feet, his strength gave out. He fell the last 30 feet, landing hard. He shattered his left ankle, but he did not care. Medics surrounded him, trying to treat his hands and his ankle. They also tried to get water into him. Someone told him he had saved 75 men. Doss just closed his eyes. He thought about Dorothy, about his promise to God, and about coming home. The immediate numbers told only part of the story. 75 American soldiers were rescued from Hacksaw Ridge on May 5, 1945. These were conditions that made survival mathematically impossible. However, the broader impact rippled across the entire Battle of Okinawa. The 1st Battalion, 307th Infantry, had gone up Hacksaw Ridge with 800 men on April 29th. They returned with 324 men on May 7th, suffering 476 casualties. Without Doss's actions on May 5th, that number would have been 551. The battalion would have been combat ineffective, unable to continue operations. Instead, on May 6th, the battalion retook Hacksaw Ridge. The 75 rescued men provided crucial intelligence. They revealed Japanese positions, tunnel locations, and machine gun emplacements. The assault went faster, and casualties were lower than projected. The ridge fell by evening, allowing the 77th Division to advance. This mattered strategically. Hacksaw Ridge anchored the eastern end of the Shuri Line, Japan's main defensive position on Okinawa. With the ridge secured, American forces outflanked Shuri Castle. The Japanese position soon collapsed. By May 29th, the Shuri Line fell. The Japanese retreated south, and the battle entered its final phase. Military analysts later calculated the impact. Hacksaw Ridge, falling 6 days earlier, saved an estimated 400 American casualties. The faster collapse of the Shuri Line prevented Japanese reinforcements from arriving. The Battle of Okinawa still lasted until June 22nd and killed 12,000 more Americans. However, it could have been worse. Every day shortened saved lives. The Army recognized this. On October 12, 1945, President Harry Truman awarded Desmond Doss the Medal of Honor. He was the first conscientious objector in American history to receive it. The citation noted his actions were far above and beyond the call of duty, emphasizing the extraordinary nature of his heroism. The ceremony happened at the White House. Doss stood in dress uniform, still recovering from tuberculosis and still weak. Truman placed the medal around his neck and spoke about courage and faith. Doss just nodded. He thought about the 75 men and wondered if they were alive, hoping they were living good lives. The medical community studied Doss's actions, trying to understand how one man accomplished this feat. The physical demands alone should have been impossible. Lowering 75 men down a 400-foot cliff required moving approximately 13,500 pounds of weight. He did this manually, using only rope and his own strength. Sports scientists calculated the caloric expenditure, estimating 8,000 calories burned. Doss probably consumed only 500 calories that day, along with 1 canteen of water. His body should have shut down. It did not. Faith, adrenaline, or something else kept him moving, always for one more man. His constant prayer became the mechanism and the framework for impossible endurance. Military doctrine changed because of Hacksaw Ridge. Combat medics received updated training on rope rescue techniques. The double figure 8 knot Doss used became standard instruction. Lowering wounded from elevated positions entered field manuals. The Army studied his systematic approach of finding the wounded, treating critical injuries, and moving them to extraction points. This method became official doctrine. Other services also learned from Doss's actions. Navy corpsmen studied the case. Air Force para-rescue teams and Marine combat medics adopted similar principles. The core principle remained clear. One determined individual can make a strategic difference. Saving lives preserves combat power. Medics are not support personnel. They are force multipliers. Doss never saw it that way. He was just doing his job, saving lives, and following his faith. When interviewers asked about heroism, he deflected. He stated that he was praying the entire time, thinking only of getting one more man. But to the 75 men he saved, Doss was everything. Several attended his Medal of Honor ceremony, including Captain Jack Glover. Glover apologized publicly and admitted he had been wrong. He recalled telling Doss that he would never be by his side without a rifle. Yet Doss saved his life, and Glover then felt he was the biggest fool in the Army. The men of Company B became Doss's biggest advocates. They wrote letters supporting him, testified at award ceremonies, and visited him after the war. They never forgot. How could they? These were dead men brought back to life by an unarmed medic who refused to quit. Desmond Doss did not survive the war unscathed. On May 21st, 1945, 16 days after Hacksaw Ridge, Company B was consolidating gains near Shuri. Japanese soldiers pretended to surrender. They walked forward with hands raised and then threw grenades. Doss deflected several, saving multiple men. However, one grenade landed at his feet. He tried to kick it away, but it detonated. 17 pieces of shrapnel embedded in his legs and torso. His left leg was shredded. He treated his own wounds and applied tourniquets. Doss waited 5 hours for stretcher bearers. When they arrived, a more critically wounded soldier needed the stretcher. Doss gave it up, telling them to take the other man first. While waiting, a Japanese sniper shot him. The round went through his left arm, causing a compound fracture with a shattered bone. Doss used a rifle stock as a splint. He crawled 300 yards to the battalion aid station and refused treatment until more critical patients were handled. He spent the next 6 months in hospitals. Doss was evacuated to the USS Mercy, then to hospitals in Hawaii, and finally to the mainland United States. Doctors found he had contracted tuberculosis on Leyte, which was made worse on Okinawa. Treatment required removing his left lung and 5 ribs. He faced years of recovery. Doss was medically discharged in 1946. He was 90% disabled. He had wanted to be a carpenter before the war, but the injuries ended that dream. He could not lift his left arm above shoulder height, and he could not do physical labor. The Army gave him a modest disability pension, but it was not enough to live on. Dorothy earned her nursing degree. She graduated from the University of Michigan in 1951. She worked full-time to support the family. Desmond and Dorothy had one son. His name was Desmond Thomas Doss, Jr. He was born in 1946. They called him Tommy. Tommy followed his father into medicine. He became an Army medic himself. Later, he became a firefighter and paramedic. This commitment to serving and saving lives became a family tradition. Desmond spent his post-war years on a small farm in Rising Fawn, Georgia. The farm was 4 acres in size. He built a log cabin himself. Despite his limited mobility, he was determined to contribute. He grew vegetables and raised chickens. He spoke at churches about faith and service. Desmond became an advocate for conscientious objectors. He argued that serving one's country did not require killing. He also believed that saving lives was a form of service. The tuberculosis treatment damaged his hearing. He received massive antibiotic doses. By 1976, he was completely deaf. Desmond lived in silence for 12 years. Dorothy learned sign language. She carried a notepad and wrote everything down for him. In 1988, doctors gave him a cochlear implant. This was experimental technology at the time. It worked successfully. Doss heard his wife's voice for the first time in over a decade. He also heard his grandchildren and the world around him. On November 17, 1991, Desmond and Dorothy were driving to the hospital. Dorothy had cancer and had regular treatment appointments. Desmond lost control of the car. It rolled down an embankment. Dorothy died instantly. She was 70 years old. They had been married for 49 years. Desmond survived with minor injuries. However, the guilt haunted him. He had saved 75 men in combat. He felt unable to save his own wife in a car accident. He remarried in 1993. His new wife was Frances Dumont. She helped him through the grief. Frances stayed with him until the end. Desmond died on March 23, 2006. He passed away at home in Piedmont, Alabama. He experienced difficulty breathing. His one remaining lung finally gave out. He was 87 years old. Desmond Doss is buried at Chattanooga National Cemetery. His grave is in Section 33. It is grave 318. The headstone is simple. It shows his name, rank, and dates of service. It notes he was a Medal of Honor recipient. There is nothing about Hacksaw Ridge. There is nothing about 75 men. It is just a soldier's grave among thousands of others. His legacy, however, lives everywhere. Today, the United States Army Medical Department teaches Doss's story at Fort Sam Houston. Combat medic training includes a full day on Hacksaw Ridge. Students study the rope technique and the systematic approach. They also learn about his prayer-driven determination. Instructors emphasize one lesson above all others: medics never quit. If there is one more wounded soldier, you must go get him. The Desmond Doss Health Clinic at Fort Bragg opened in 2006. It treats 10,000 soldiers annually. The clinic offers primary care, mental health services, and rehabilitation. Its motto states, "Serving those who serve." Every medic who graduates combat training visits the clinic. They see Doss's Medal of Honor displayed in the lobby. They read his citation and understand the standard of service. In 2016, Mel Gibson directed Hacksaw Ridge. The film told Doss's story. Andrew Garfield portrayed him. The movie earned 6 Academy Award nominations and won 2. It introduced Desmond Doss to millions who had never heard of him. The film took some liberties, such as compressing timelines and combining characters. However, the core of the story remained accurate. It showed one medic, with 0 weapons, saving 75 men. Desmond Doss Jr. attended the premiere. He watched his father's story on screen. Afterward, he stated that his mother was the most underrated person in the entire story. He emphasized that without her support, none of it would have happened. Dorothy Doss believed in her husband when nobody else did. She gave him the Bible he carried through combat. She waited for him through years of medical treatment. Dorothy supported him through decades of disability. Indeed, behind every hero stands someone who believed in them first. The National Museum of the United States Army in Fort Belvoir displays Doss's Medal of Honor. It is in the main gallery. It is next to his combat medic bag and his Bible. Dorothy's inscription is still visible. It speaks of the assurance of a happy meeting place in heaven. They are together now. In Okinawa, the Maeda Escarpment is preserved. The Japanese call it Maeda Kochi. Uraso City maintains hiking trails to the summit. A memorial plaque marks a location known as Desmond Doss Point. This is the spot where he lowered 75 men. Japanese and American tourists visit together. They stand where the battle happened. They try to imagine one man doing the impossible. The 75 men Doss saved went on to live full lives. They returned home and got married. They had children and built careers. These men lived the American dream that their service had secured. Several became successful businessmen, teachers, factory workers, and police officers. They sent Christmas cards to Doss every year. These included letters thanking him and photos of their grandchildren. This served as proof that his actions on May 5th, 1945, echoed through generations. Captain Jack Glover lived until 2008. He was 93 years old. Before he died, he recorded a final interview. He stated that Desmond Doss was the bravest man he ever knew. Captain Glover also admitted he was the biggest fool for not seeing it sooner. He recounted Doss's promise to be by his side, saving life while he took life. Doss kept that promise and saved Glover's life. Captain Glover spent 50 years trying to repay that debt but never managed it. The last survivor of Company B died in 2019. He was 96 years old. With his death, no living soldier could testify to Hacksaw Ridge firsthand. However, the story survives in documentary footage and after-action reports. It also lives on in letters home and in oral histories recorded by the Library of Congress. The memories have been passed down through generations. That is why stories like this matter. The official records tell us Desmond Doss earned the Medal of Honor for exceptional valor. He rescued 75 men under fire. He was also the first conscientious objector to receive the award. These are important facts. However, they do not convey what it felt like to be alone on that plateau. They do not describe hearing wounded men cry for help. Nor do they explain knowing the Japanese were hunting survivors. They cannot capture the feeling of one wrong move meaning death. Yet he chose to stay anyway. The documents do not tell us about faith. They do not describe him praying, "Lord, help me get one more," 75 times. They do not explain believing God would provide strength for each rescue. Nor do they reveal trusting that faith would sustain him when physical strength failed. The Medal of Honor citation does not mention Dorothy. It does not mention the Bible she gave him. It also does not mention her waiting at home. She wrote letters and worked to support them after the war. She believed in him when the entire army said he was worthless. History records 75 men saved. However, it does not record their names or their stories. It does not record their lives or the children they raised. It also fails to record the contributions they made. These were ripples spreading from one medic's refusal to abandon them. These men left behind patrol reports, medical records, and citations. However, those documents cannot convey the absolute certainty that May 5th, 1945, would be their last day alive. They cannot convey the impossible hope of hearing rope scraping rock. They also cannot convey seeing an unarmed medic appear through smoke and fire. Nor can they convey hearing him say he was getting them out of there. These documents cannot convey the weight of survival guilt. They cannot express the feeling of being alive because someone else chose to risk everything. If this story moved you, please do a favor right now. Hit the like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people who need to hear it. This includes stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. It also includes stories about faith stronger than fear. Finally, it shares stories about one person making a strategic difference. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We are rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. These are stories about medics who refused to quit. They are about pilots who defied physics. They are about soldiers who charged impossible odds. These are tales of real people and real heroism. This is not Hollywood fiction. It is historical fact. Drop a comment right now. Tell us where you are watching from. Are you in the United States, Japan, Australia, the Philippines, or Germany? Our community stretches across the entire world. It includes former soldiers, history students, and people looking for inspiration. You are not just a viewer. You are part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Tell us if this story inspired you. Just let us know you are here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for making sure Private First Class Desmond Thomas Doss and the 75 men accompany B do not disappear into silence. Thank you for remembering that one unarmed medic proved that faith and courage can accomplish the impossible. These men deserve to be remembered. You are helping to make that happen. Never forget Hacksaw Ridge. Never forget the medic who would not leave. Never forget that saving lives is the highest form of service. One more, just one more. That is all it takes to change the world.